This is MichMash, a weekly conversation where we try to unjumble an important and sometimes under-the-radar statewide story that affects you. I'm Cheyna Roth.
And I'm Alethia Kasben. This week, the Michigan House held a voting session for the first time since the end of June. It's also likely to be the only significant voting day ahead of the November election, where Democrats, who currently lead the chamber, are fighting to keep their slim majority.
Alethia, I'm always curious when I hear about nights like these. How late were you and your fellow members of the press corps at the Capitol there last night?
Well, luckily for the Capitol Press Corps, it was not an all-nighter. It actually wasn't a late night at all, in Capitol terms. Mm-hmm. I think they wrapped up before 9 p.m., which is, early for the amount of stuff they tried to do in one day.
Yeah, they really crammed a lot into this one day. A last-minute supplemental spending plan for schools, finalizing a retirement change for school employees that, as we've talked about here before, first came up during the budget, and quite a bit more, right, Alethia?
Yes, that's right. So mainly they had this supplemental spending bill for K through 12 schools. This was $126 million, which is not a huge amount of money in sort of Lansing spending plan terms. Most of it, $125 million, is set to go toward school mental health and school safety grants. This is after Democrats cut $300 million from this line item in the budget. So they are restoring some, but not all of it, after criticism from education leaders and Republicans.
Schools will also now permanently pay less into the state's retirement system, and some school employees will no longer contribute 3% of their pay toward retirement health care. This was already in place for the current school year as part of the budget. Schools and legislative Democrats wanted to make it permanent, and now that bill is headed to Governor Gretchen Whitmer.
A busy day for a September session, but it's also showing House Democrats in particular, getting some goodwill back from the school groups ahead of the election. The day, of course, was not without its own drama. Republicans opposed both of these significant measures. And in the Senate, the supplemental didn't get immediate effect from the Republicans there. So that money won't actually be available for schools until likely March of next year.
In the House, where, again, there is an election coming up, Republicans wanted more money toward the grants, but overwhelmingly voted for the bill. On the other side of the Capitol, Senate Minority Leader Ark Nesbitt, a Republican, he called it a half-baked bill.
They could have fully restored funding for school security and student mental health support services. An opportunity to avoid the massive cuts coming to these critical funds in a matter of days. All because of the budget they passed earlier this year, where they refused to negotiate, refused to compromise with Republicans.
House Speaker Joe Tate from Detroit said Democrats have taken every opportunity to support local educators.
Today, we will pass a school aid supplemental to ensure our schools are strong and our kids are healthy. This is meaningful change for Michigan students. And as we all know, actions speak louder than words. And House Democrats are bringing transformational change to local schools and continuing to put people first.
The House moved a lot of other odds and ends, including, after our conversation on campaign finance last week, I might add, one bill that would allow the Department of State to seek immediate court action to stop campaign finance violations. Another bill would block individuals who have been convicted of certain election-related crimes from serving on boards of canvassers, which certify elections in the state. Both of those bills still have a long ways to go before they head to Governor Gretchen Whitmer, though.
They were here. They were a bit chaotic. And now we likely won't see a ton of action, especially in the House, until after November 5th. So we can all take a break. We're going to take a short break here, but stick around because when we come back, we're going to talk with former Governor John Engler and former Lieutenant Governor John Cherry about their new initiative, the Democracy Defense Project. We'll be right back. Welcome back to MichMash. I'm Cheyna Roth.
And I'm Alethia Kasben. Today we are joined by former Governor John Engler, a Republican who served in the office from 1991 until 2003, and former Lieutenant Governor John Cherry, a Democrat who served in that office from 2003 until 2011. Thank you both for joining us today.
You're very welcome.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
So you were both part of an announcement last week that you would be launching a state branch of the Democracy Defense Project. And I'm hoping you can give listeners an idea of what that is and why you think it's important. So Governor Engler, we'll start with you on that.
All right. Happy to give it a shot, and John will fill in all the blanks. But basically, everybody in Michigan knows there's an election coming up on November the 5th. Everybody ought to go out and vote. And there are a lot of ways to vote. You can vote absentee, or you can show up at the polls. In fact, Michigan is so liberal now, we can go even show up on election day and register to vote and then cast a vote. But once those votes are cast, then it's the obligation of these local clerks, some 1,500 plus clerks, 83 county clerks, to get the ballots tallied and the results reported in. And we want people in Michigan to have confidence that that process is going to work, that the count will be accurate, that people who are entitled to vote, vote, and that people who shouldn't be voting don't find a way to somehow get a vote stuffed in the ballot box. So basically, we think there should be fair, transparent, open process that results in an election result. And John and I both been on the sides of winning and losing. So, we want the results, whatever they are, to reflect the votes that were actually cast by the people who were entitled to vote. So we think that Michigan's done a good job in the past, and elections have turned out one way or the other. One party's won, one party's lost. But once the votes are cast, that ought to be it. And we're hoping that it can be a straightforward process in 2024. And if people are out there making up stuff, then we hope that we're in a position to say, wait a minute, that's not right.
And, we're joined in that process by former Governor Jim Blanchard and former Congressman and Senate Majority Leader Mike Bishop. And our hopes there is to have this bipartisan team to kind of help lend some credibility to this umpire role that John just talked about. Obviously, 4 years ago, there was a great deal of controversy about the accuracy of the count. And we want to give people some assurance that simply is not the case in Michigan, that Michigan elections are well run, that you can count on the result. And that's why we're kind of in a reactive mode as we see those things being brought into question. We're there to kind of hopefully provide some facts, some accuracy, some truth to the debate. It's important to a democratic process that the very basic action of an election have some public confidence, and that's what we want to make sure we instill in this process.
So the main website for this Democracy Defense Project, talks about wanting to ensure that politicians aren't, undermining election integrity and to bolster their own campaign, and kind of talking about false narratives around election fraud and stolen elections, right? So how do you guys plan to work toward this to rebuild confidence in the electoral process?
Well, one of the things that John and I are doing, and Jim Blanchard and Mike Bishop, as was mentioned, is we're talking to folks like you who've got audiences that are out there. And when you're hearing from us, or more importantly, your listeners are hearing from us, we're people who've been through collectively a lot of elections. In my case, 10 different general elections, I guess, in 10 different primaries. But what we want people to know is that we're giving information based on our experiences and what we know to be true. Today, so often, they don't listen to your show. They go on social media. They see somebody's comment, and the next thing you know, somebody makes another comment. The next thing you know, the rumor mill is working overtime to say things that just simply aren't so. Things literally get made up, and it's the worst ever backyard fence that things get tossed over. And what we hope to do is say, wait a minute, just stop. And I'll give you one example. John may have others, but I'll give you one from 4 years ago in 2020, little old Antrim County, about 23,000 people up there. And they used to be part of my state Senate district many years ago. Not big enough. If it all voted one way or the other, it'd probably sway very many elections. It's a small county. They reported inaccurately, as they put their numbers together, they basically had two numbers switched the wrong columns. They caught the error. The process catches errors like that. They corrected it, but not before the wrong numbers got set out. And even though it was a very small difference one way or the other, I mean, literally hundreds of votes, that was somehow interpreted to be the election was rigged, something had happened, there was a conspiracy. None of that was true. It was a simple recording error that they caught, reversed, and then correctly reported. But that got spun up on the internet and in the silly part of the web, and boy, people took all kinds of wrong conclusions from that. We would hope, rather than something like that happening ever again, and I don't think it will, but if it were, to be able to help damp down the rumors and the suspicion and the idea that a cabal took over.
And, John mentioned 1,500 local clerks. Each one of them has an army of volunteers. So you're talking literally tens of thousands of people are working this election process. And when you've got that many people engaged, there's no way you can have a conspiracy. I mean, it gets caught, someone's going to spill the beans well before it gets that far down the road. So, but it's important if you remember, if those volunteers are the lifeblood of this process and they work hard, they spend their whole day doing it, little pay, sometimes they don't even get a meal break. They don't deserve to be accused of this kind of fraud that sometimes emerges in these contests. And so we want to not only help tamper down bad information, but also to celebrate the Michigan citizens that devote the time that they do to help these elections proceed.
What has been your personal reactions to former President Donald Trump's election misinformation efforts and his repeated claims that the 2020 election was stolen?
Well, number one, I think we're trying to focus on the future less than the past. I mean, I can probably cite you a couple instances of Democrats playing the same game. I mean, I think of the Democratic candidate in Georgia. She had a hard time accepting the result. So, I mean, both sides have done this. It's natural to be disappointed when you've lost an election. But I think the force of his comments has really caused an organization like us to come forward and say, we don't want a repeat of what's transpired in the past. We want to make sure that going forward, there's a great deal of confidence in this election, 2024.
Yeah, I think John's right. I think, we've seen bad behavior on the parts of candidates in both parties. I think not so much in the presidential election. We've had close elections. I was in Florida way back when in the year 2000 when the Bush v. Gore race was so close and ballots were being counted and all kinds of things were being said. And I'd like to see these things not have to ever be in the courtroom. I'd like to see the courts stay out because the counts were done accurately and timely. I think one thing that confuses people is the rules have changed a bit. I mean, we didn't used to have the ability to register on election day. I think you had to be registered, John, 30 days before, I think was the old rule. And so that's different for people. That certainly makes it harder for a candidate. I mean, as a candidate, I'd like to know who's going to be voting so I could reach out and say, this is why you should vote for me or for the person I favor. But, most things change in life and there have been changes that I might like, some I don't like. But over the years, the parties understand the changes and they try then to say, well, okay, this is going to work. I'm going to do this to get my vote out or get my votes cast early or whatever. And sometimes people say, well, wait a minute, how's that happening? And it's because the law got written differently. But the important point is that all of these elections in all 50 states and in Michigan, in our state, in all 83 counties, they're covered by law. So they should be conducted then in accordance with the law. And what John and I are saying, and what Jim Blanchard and Mike Bishop have said, is that the clerks do a pretty darn play an important role in making sure the law is followed and there's no deviation. And that's the way it should be. And what we're hoping to be able to say is, yeah, this clerk did a very good job. And it's important there not be. I think one of the things that gets people worried when they think there's a last minute change, something they didn't know about, that happens, and that gets them worried. So I'd like to see that minimized and frankly not exist. But I also think the best way for a candidate who wants to win is to stop talking about the past and only talk about the future, and get out there and get your vote out.
There are always you see some, even right now there's some challenging in the courts on the current election stuff, but what's important there is that people are doing that in advance, and they're doing it within the context of the law. They're going to court, and the court will decide, and the court will make it clear what the law is, and what's important then is everybody play by that rule. And that's what I think we want to stress more than anything, is the system's designed so that on election day, the rules are clear, and that will govern the counting of the ballots and the declaration of the end result.
We interrupt our own program for an important announcement. Hey, MichMash listeners, this is your host, Cheyna Roth.
And I'm Alethia Kasben from Gongwer News Service. On Wednesday, October 16th at 7 p.m., we will be recording MichMash Live at Urban Beat in Old Town Lansing.
Come through, bring a friend or two or three or five to watch us unjumble the statewide politics and under-the-radar stories that affect you. Plus, we will have some special guests that we'll be interviewing. We'll reveal them as we get closer to the date.
And plus, you'll get to ask us questions about MichMash and our coverage of the 2024 elections.
It's going to be amazing. So run, don't walk to the online link to reserve your spot that is located on the Gongwer and WDET websites. Space is limited, and we want to see you there. So sign up now.
Now we return you back to our MichMash interview with former Governor Engler and former Lieutenant Governor Cherry. So looking ahead to November, to this year's election, right? I have noticed rhetoric, really starting to heat up in the last week or so, kind of around this idea of Democrats cheating in elections. So I know, both of you just said that both sides have kind of played this game, and I think there is some truth to that. But right now, there's a Michigan Republican Party radio ad that says Democrats are cheating because Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson argued in court that Robert Kennedy Jr. shouldn't be on the ballot. I saw a mailer over the weekend from a different Republican aligned PAC, not from the official party, that says, voters, make sure you go vote early so Democrats can't vote for you. What is your reaction to that kind of rhetoric? Is it worrying to you right now? Is this a problem, or is this just kind of electoral politics at play?
Well, let's take the second part of that first, since it's sort of directed at things that people are Republican or purported to be Republican. One thing Donald Trump has done is brought a lot of people out who, I think, John, they used to be in your party or they were nobody's party, and now they're out there saying they're Republicans. I've had people I've never known to be a Republican telling me they're a better Republican than I am. And I'm subject to criticism because I actually won elections, not lost them. But nonetheless, the go vote early, that's like, everybody's trying to alarm their voters to go out and vote early, get those votes cast. And so there'll be, I've seen some pitches around some issues that I think are just completely wrong, but they're out there saying you got to vote early because on the lawsuit in Secretary Benson, I'm not familiar with the details. There was some ruling that I think was relative to absentee ballot signatures or something, and there I think there's a legitimate issue because as I understand it, maybe her ruling came down and said, well, you've got to presume the signature is valid. I believe the law says that the clerks have to verify the signatures. So if you're, and I know when you're signing a petition and filing it with the Secretary of State, they don't presume the signature is correct. You've got to defend that signature and prove that it is the person who signed the ballot. And so you don't, and that little subtle shift of presumption would be a change. And that's what the Secretary of State ought to resist doing. I would say we, you, as she has said, the current Secretary of State, how good these elections have been in the past. Well, then leave them alone. Don't try to do something, especially doing it late. It just seems like, well, wait a minute, why are you doing this? And I think in this case, we'll let the court sort it out. But I think actually she might have misread the law or is trying to add something that wasn't there. With Kennedy on the ballot to that question, again, I mean, the law in Michigan was silent on that. The Court of Appeals, in a bipartisan decision, said, he can remove his name, and they challenged it up to the Supreme Court. They went the other way in a very divided opinion. I, I I just wish those things weren't out there. But again, as John Cherry just said a moment ago, this stuff is all before the election. It does not impact directly the counting of the votes that are going to be cast in the election. And that's what we are focused on, making sure the count is correct and people who are entitled to vote, and that their vote counts for one.
And as John said, in the case of Cornel West, the court decided he was going to be on the ballot. So the court was the umpire here, and they acted within what they believe was appropriate within the law. In the case of Kennedy, it's not just a question of Democrats and Republicans. He was the nominee of the Natural Rights Party, and they were saying, hey, wait a minute, he's our candidate. If he's off the ballot, we don't have a ballot designation next time. So there were some issues involved in that. But the court, again, is sorting those things out. And when the votes are cast, it's going to be clear who the candidates are. And the process can unfold, and the ballots can be counted, and the result could be accurate.
I actually sort of privately think Kennedy staying on the ballot probably is more harmful to Miss Harris than is Mr. Trump. But that's, again, different people have different views on that. I certainly don't think it's dispositive of who's going to win Michigan.
Yeah. What is the plan for November 6th? I mean, we know that it's very likely we won't have a clear winner on election night for president or other races. In the past, this has caused a lot of people to get frustrated, upset, and that sort of snowballs into a mistrust of the process. So what are you planning to do essentially to maintain the calm in the days and weeks after the election? Is there a plan?
Well, I hope we in Michigan, John, we can watch other states fight it out, huh? While we're settled here.
Well, and you're right. We don't have some of the counting debates that are happening in places like Pennsylvania and Georgia. So, I mean, that could drag it out in those two states and cause angst in all of the other 48 states, not knowing what the results in those two are. But in Michigan, the counting is pretty straightforward, so it shouldn't be here. But, we're a reactive organization. So, I mean, part of our job is to look at what kind of comments are being put in front of Michigan citizens and to say, hey, look, that's just not accurate, or, it doesn't deserve that kind of response. It's not just a matter of being critical or being disappointed. Some people may be advocating violence, and we have to be there to say, look, the process was a fair one. It doesn't deserve that kind of response.
Yeah, John, that's spot on in terms of, John used a Pennsylvania example or, issues in Pennsylvania. I mean, my understanding is they can count absentee ballots 4 or 5 days after the polls have closed. And I personally think that's just not right. And I think it's bad for the country to have that happening, especially in the election. Everybody thinks it's going to be really close, and that Pennsylvania itself might be the state that is decisive to have this going on. And part of the problem, again, I believe in this case it was a court interpretation again that said, okay, these ballots that can come in. I mean, if you're voting absentee, vote now. Then don't be waiting. Don't say I'm going to vote. I don't know when their last day is, but so late in the process that your ballot somehow could show up 3 days after the election. That bothers people, and it does give rise to lots of conspiracy theories, and it seems like the nation's filled up with a lot of conspiracy fans these days.
Yeah, Chris Thomas, the former director of elections in Michigan, I heard him on the radio today say, if you have to mail your ballot less than 10 days before the election, you need to just take it and drop it off at the local clerk's office so that you don't have these post-mark questions. That I think, I think Michigan, by and large, has sorted these problems out in advance. So we're not going to see them, but nonetheless, we're not immune from what other states do and the confusion they cause. But what we can do is try to provide some explanation when we see it happen.
That's right. Your ballot has to be there by, it has to get to the polls by 8 p.m., I think, on election night to be counted. And knowing that, mail it early. Or as John said, deliver it.
Right. Like you said, voters here in Michigan can take their ballot to a drop box. You can go you can have your absentee ballot and take it to an early voting site and tabulate it in person. So people have a lot of options. All right. Well, Lieutenant Governor Cherry, Governor Engler, thank you so much for joining us on MichMash today.
That was a pleasure. Glad you had us.
Hey, thanks for having us, and thanks for working on this issue. I think all of this helps voters understand more about what lies ahead here.